In today's video, I want to talk about how I work with clients on improving mindful eating habits. Because what I want for clients is not to be following a strict diet where they feel for every day of their lives forever, they have to be hitting super specific number goals on all of the macros. Instead, we want to be cultivating habits that are livable and very effective. And mindful eating is a very, very broad umbrella term, and a lot fits into it. In this video, I'm not going to be talking as much about what could be called the spiritual growth and self-awareness part of mindful eating, which is incredibly important. But today I'm going to be focusing on 5 aspects of just developing better eating habits that allow you to eat more mindfully with more awareness, a little more awareness of your goals and yourself, without being diet focused. The first P is protein. And if you're one of my clients, you know I cannot stop talking about protein. And there's an important reason why. Protein is not only biologically essential for the optimal functioning of our bodies. When it comes to weight loss and body composition, protein plays a huge role. Everything from managing appetite to building muscle. So often when people increase their protein and they do it significantly enough to feel an effect, which is usually between 20 to 40 grams of protein per meal, and making sure that snacks also have some protein in them, maybe 10 to 20 grams, if people just make that one small change about their eating, it's amazing how much more mindful their eating can become overall because they're less hungry and they're experiencing fewer cravings. The second P, which goes hand in hand with eating more protein, is planning. It's hard to eat more protein if you're not planning ahead because eating more healthfully requires planning and preparation. You have to plan ahead, you have to shop smart, and you have to fill your house with things that are going to support your goals. And on top of that, you probably need to think ahead about times that are going to be challenging and disruptive to your goals, like maybe not a regular day. So you're gonna need those go-to, meals and snacks on the go that help you stay focused on your trajectory. The third P is portions. And this is probably the biggest area where there's a lot of diet misinformation that can become quite toxic. So I like to be careful when we're talking about portions because I don't want to accidentally encourage under eating. So we're not looking for tiny, tiny portions of things, or on the flip side, using diet strategies like overloading your plate with vegetables and then having very small amounts of everything else. Because ultimately, good nutrition suggestions can be twisted and taken to the extreme to the point that they're actually not so helpful anymore, or they're not in someone's best interest. So I'm very cautious when talking about portions. Specifically, we want to watch portions of things that are super, super calorie dense and tasty and easy to mindlessly overconsume. And it's important to point out, I'm not saying don't eat these foods. These aren't off-limits foods, but just to be aware that there are certain foods where you may need to use a measuring spoon or a measuring cup just to be aware of what you're eating, just to systemically control the amount of calories that you're getting from these foods because it's easy for it to get out of control. So even healthy foods like nut butters, nuts, healthy products like granola, these are things that can really stack up super fast if you're not paying attention. And the reason I say that these aren't off-limits foods is because to some degree, having some foods that are calorie dense as a part of your diet, it's helpful because you don't have to eat a huge volume of food in order to feel full. We want some of these denser fats as part of our diet in order to feel more satisfied. However, the one little shift is the P of portions, so that you're actually paying attention to how much of these calorie dense foods you're taking in so that you know how it fits into your overall goals. So you're balancing the satisfaction that you're getting from these foods with still needing some volume to feel satisfied as well. So it helps you balance those two goals in improving your nutrition. The fourth P in encouraging more mindful eating is places. Being more aware of how where you are affects your eating and how that food environment plays a role. So for example, you can start with your home. What's in your fridge? What's in your cabinets? What's in your pantry? And often our food environment plays a huge role in what decisions we make because we tend to eat what's available. And then if we're keeping things around that for us as individuals at this time are ultra tempting foods that are easy to overeat, you're probably not setting yourself up for success. So managing your home eating environment and to some degree your work eating environment is one of the best things that you can do to help arm yourself to be a more mindful eater who feels more empowerment around food. The second part of places is how often you're eating out, because that's actually a really big deal. Eating out makes that other P, portions, much more difficult to negotiate, partly because you don't know necessarily what's happening back there in that restaurant kitchen or at the convenience store, the factory, whatever it is. But you also probably are eating a more rich version. So for example, if you make rice at home, you're probably not putting a ton of oil in your rice, for example. But this is a really common practice in restaurants and fast casual places, is to put a lot of butter or oil in the carbohydrates. So that's what I mean about it could be a lot richer, it could be a lot more calorie dense, just because it makes it taste really good, it makes it more palatable. So eating out is something to be mindful of, that I would encourage clients to eat out less often. And then when they are in that place of they're eating outside the home, they're eating at a restaurant, they're being even more mindful of portions than usual. And of course, how often you eat out plays a really big role in how mindful you have to be. Because if you eat out once every 2 weeks, whatever you do is basically, at least on a physiological level, going to make practically no difference. Sure, you might step on the scale the next morning, be a few pounds up. That's really probably from sodium and somewhat from carbohydrates. But the more often you eat out, the more you're probably going to see real weight trends being impacted by just eating more from eating out. So I always encourage clients, if you eat out, let's say more than 2 or 3 times a week, start where you are and just focus on reduction, because that P of places plays a really, really huge role in weight management and body composition. The final P in cultivating more mindful eating is people. Kind of like places, people are part of our environment, and our relationships are a really big part of informing how we eat, because it probably plays a role in, do we eat breakfast? Do we not eat breakfast? Do we eat a family dinner? Do we not eat a family dinner? Do we eat our lunch by ourselves, or do we go out for lunch with coworkers? The culture of how we eat often dictates the choices that we make. So if you're going to change that tide of how you're eating, sometimes you have to start with the people around you. Now, if you live in a very health conscious culture, if you make changes to your eating to get healthier, probably no one's gonna notice, or it's just gonna blend right in. It's gonna have really zero net effect on your relationships. But if you live in a food culture that tends to be less healthy, let's say has a less healthy relationship with food, maybe your micro food culture of your family uses food a lot to relax, to unwind, to de-stress, and so there's a less healthy relationship with food. If you change your eating, it's quite possible it's going to make waves. And so it's really important that you consider, as part of the journey of improving your eating, becoming more mindful, working on your body composition, helping reach a healthy weight, you have to think about the people in your life too. Not in a fatalistic way of, oh, I could never do that because of how my family eats, but to just acknowledge that if you're going to start making changes, A, it's in your best interest if the changes dovetail as easily as possible into whatever everybody else is already doing. Basically, it's in your best interest if it makes as few waves as possible, just so that it reduces the stress for you. But then B, to also know if you want this to be sustainable, there's probably going to need to be some kind of systemic change in your food culture, your little micro food culture of your family and friends, where it's going to be some combination of you deciding at sometimes you're not going to do something that everyone else is doing. And at other times, there might be a very slow re-education of your food culture and of your family to say, I'm making this decision. I invite you to join me, and doing it in ways that fit your personality, your unique situation, and your family, because everyone's going to be different when it comes to this in terms of how much control that you have over the rest of your family. So, for example, if you're the mom in a family and you do most of the cooking, you're going to have a lot of say in what your family eats. So if you decide to take a significant step in changing the micro food culture of your family, you're going to have a huge impact. Everyone may not be completely happy, but ultimately you probably are the one steering the ship. On the other hand, let's say you live with your parents and they're the ones who are creating the dominant food culture in your family. It's probably going to be a different situation. It's going to be more of an uphill battle. You might have to be more self-differentiated. You might not make as much of a difference on the other people as they may have the potential to make a big difference on you. But just know that no matter what, when you change, it's common that other people around you change too. You just have to know it's probably not going to be overnight. It's probably going to be a process. So just know that if you do need to be more self-differentiated, if you do need to make more of your own decisions that are different from the people around you, you probably are making some kind of impact, especially if you're consistent. But ultimately, the most important thing when it comes to people is that you're making these changes for yourself. So what other people are doing is going to be part of your world, but what you do affecting them shouldn't be your concern. You should just be thinking about the changes that you're making for yourself and the difference it's going to make for you. And just know that it's probably a fringe benefit that is going to have some ripple effect and effects on other people. Those are my 5 P's for cultivating more mindful eating. If you enjoy these tips, share this video and check out my website for more free content.